Well, it's been really interesting for me to observe my mom, who is now 94 and doing very well, to listen to her talk about her relationship to the healthcare system in Canada. She's incredibly happy, and I ask her, like, you know, what is it about your healthcare that makes you so happy? And it's just that she has been blessed with a series of doctors who will listen to her. It's not about objectively the quality of care, because she's 94. Like, what does it matter? Like, we're not interested in heroic medicine here.
Right.
She has some aches and pains, and she wants someone to go and, like, give her a sympathetic ear and some understanding of what her values are, which is she doesn't want to, like, take 20 pills a day. She just wants to be taken seriously as a human being. It's all she's ever wanted.
Right.
Like, she probably would have said the same thing at 15. Just take me seriously. I don't need you to, like, you know, I don't need heroics. I just need the world to look at me as a black woman and understand that I am the equal of anyone. That's what she wants.
Yeah.
Right? And the system has given her that. For all of its flaws that people like to rail on about the Canadian healthcare system, they have given my mom her humanity.
Double shoulder.
You can. You are undeniable.
What's your superpower?
You are undefeatable.
I got goosebumps.
You are the less than 1%. Even when it doubts you, you can't let that get you down.
Your path is your path. Stay committed, stay focused, be disagreeable, optimistic, and relentless.
You are the less than 1%.
All right, welcome everybody to Less Than 1%. I am a little embarrassed today because I have an amazing treat for you all, but actually it's more a treat for me. And that's Malcolm Gladwell, probably my favorite, I would say my favorite author, but I see you more as a philosopher in my mind. And so you've helped to guide my philosophies throughout my life, more than you even want to know. The 10,000 hours, like, I forced my kids on a 10,000 hour, track to become basketball players, and then also David and Goliath cut steep. But so thank you for being on. Welcome.
Not at all. My pleasure.
I have a lot of questions for you, and the first one I thought of is, so obviously I'm all in, as you can tell from my wall. I'm all in on reading your books and really diving in, not just for the aesthetic or sort of the pleasure of reading, but really the philosophy behind it, which is, I think, the reader that you want to get to. But who do you read? Like, sort of when you're like, hey, I want to be, I want to be entertained, or I want to be inspired, I want to see what different people are doing. Who's your go-to?
Well, my favorite author is Janet Malcolm, who writes. She just died, but she is really kind of the great nonfiction writer of my generation. She wrote for the New Yorker, and she would do these books that they seemed incredibly esoteric, and they were always about very intellectual subjects. But then you read them and you realized that she was talking about something else. She writes these books. They're impossible to describe. She wrote a book I'm just rereading right now about psychoanalysis, called The Impossible Profession, which she just describes in this incredibly accessible, beautiful, and complex way about what it means to go into a Freudian analysis, and like how that works and how it changes your brain. And anyway, she was that. She I'm also another person who I've learned an incredible amount from reading Michael Lewis, who's also here at Pushkin, another. But because he writes very differently than I do, but I always wanted to be more like him. He writes single stories that are very character driven, and I used to kind of go through his books and like underline passages and try and figure out how I could. I wanted to be much more of a storyteller like he was, and so that's something I've taken very seriously.
Yeah, we talked about this before. By the way, just so everybody knows, Malcolm graced the partnership. He was at our partnership meeting and was on stage, and we spent a short time recording a little bit of a podcast afterwards. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about, just about the way you work is you do tell stories. I mean, telling stories is the way you teach us what you're thinking. And so that's been a very deliberate thing that you've done over your career.
Yeah. But that's all, I am by training and origin a reporter. I got my start working for the Washington Post and spent 10 years. I was actually covering healthcare. That was my first assignment at the Washington Post, and it's why healthcare remains such a kind of love of mine. And that's what you quickly understand that your role is, right? You're not just communicating facts or digging up things. You're telling stories. You're helping people kind of make sense of the world. And you do that through character and narrative and all those kinds of things. And then when you move on and write books and magazine articles and do podcast episodes, that storytelling function becomes even more important. Think about it. When you're writing a book, you are asking someone to spend hours with you.
Yeah.
To make a commitment, right? Same thing with a podcast episode. Our podcasts are typically maybe 35 minutes. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Asking someone to spend 35 minutes of exclusively just listening to you. And there's only one way to do that, and that's tell a story. There's just no other, right? If you can't do that, they're just gonna stop listening.
You're still refining your craft. And so, when did you refine, when did you know that I want to tell stories to impact the world? You're sort of writing at the New Yorker. When in your career did you realize that was who you were going to be?
I don't know if there's a kind of moment when, and I never really thought about it in those terms. I always thought about it very personally. What stories do I want to tell? And I still think of it that way. I think if you start with the question, what stories does the world want to hear? Then that leads you into a bad place, because
Right.
you're trying to you're trying to pretend you're somebody else. And also you're undercutting the reason I want to see a Martin Scorsese movie is because I'm interested in Martin Scorsese.
Right.
I don't want Martin Scorsese to think, what does Malcolm want to
Right.
watch? I want him to do what he wants to do because I'm very interested in who he is. And I feel like to be any kind of professional, creative person is about asserting your taste. Right? It's the minute you start tailoring your taste to what you imagine people want, you're in trouble. You need to have confidence that the things you're interested in will be of interest to other people out there. And that's always been I've always just done stuff that I thought was, we were just talking, I just did we're doing a series right now on mistakes, where we're having professional people, sit with us and tell the story of what they consider to be their biggest mistake.
Yeah.
And
That's brilliant.
it's these are stories. They really are stories. They have beginning, middles, and ends, and then they reflect on the story. And I just this morning interviewed the guy who was the co-founder of Blackberry. And there was a moment when Blackberry could have been saved, and he failed to convince the board at Blackberry that his way was the right path. And he told the story. It was like a classic error. He thought that logic was all he needed, basically. And that, as you know, if that was the case, we wouldn't need doctors, right?
Yeah.
The doctor's role is to go beyond logic. Logic doesn't work on patients. I mean, some of the time, but
Right.
and so those are they're that kind of that's just an idea that appeals to me. I want to hear those stories, and so I have the confidence that other people want to hear them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. We talked last time about almost, something I'm working on right now, and the idea of, that gap you talked about. I mean, it's one small thing. In this case, that could be a mistake or could be, a championship.
Yeah.
And I'm sensitive to Blackberry too, because as two Canadians, I would have loved to see Blackberry.
I know. Well, I'm from Waterloo, so I'm from the birthplace of
the
Blackberry.
birthplace, yeah.
And the interview I did, the guy who was the co-founder of it was across the hall from me in my second year of university.
Oh, wow.
I've known him since he was a kid.
Oh, my goodness.
Since I was a kid. So it was a very fun interview.
Wow.
He actually, it's interesting because it's a relevance to your world. The fundamental issue that we settled on, and I had to give him, he did not come up with this. This was because I know this guy. He's incredibly smart, smarter than almost anyone else I've ever met. And he has the problem that smart people have, which is they assume because they can see a choice clearly or a decision clearly, that everyone else can too. And he had to kind of adjust his perception and get inside the minds of, in this case, his board, who were they're just not on his level. I mean, he just was way ahead. And he couldn't do that. He didn't understand that and I feel like that's a relevant thing because this is a fundamental problem that people have in medicine as well, is that you guys know so much more than we do that at some point you have to be able to translate all that expertise and knowledge into for not just an inexpert audience, but an audience that has a million different reasons why they don't want to go along with what you're saying, right? To be resistant, to be, it's just like a really interesting, that problem of being so far ahead of the people you're talking to is the central problem of kind of highly cognitively demanding professions.
And leadership. I mean, as you talk about, I think of healthcare, of course, and how with AI and knowledge being much more accessible, that as a physician, I'm more of a friend, a facilitator, a support, a mentor, as opposed to before where you just came to me for knowledge. And I think the same thing with, I fashion myself as a disruptor. And when you disrupt, you're way out in left field all the time. But if you don't find a way to connect the people to that vision, you end up just being out there by that video of the crazy dancing guy. You're just out there by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I you read Less Than 1%, and sort of my thing, my story, or at least parts of my story, which every time we talk, I feel like I tell you too much. Like, the last time I'm telling you all about my burns and all that stuff, just because I feel connected in that way. But you're where you are now, and if you were to say, if you were under the guise of Less Than 1% as a story as you're coming up, was there ever a time where you felt like that, where you felt that you were underrated, or you may not have had the impact that you were wanting to have?
Mm-hmm.
Or were you always sort of fully confident that I'm going to tell stories, I'm going to shape the world through my voice and through my writing?
No, I mean, I'm not someone who's... I feel like I'm not very introspective, which spares me a lot of those kinds of worries and anxieties. I'm very, I don't find myself at the end of the day that interesting. I find other people interesting. And if you take that perspective, then life's a lot easier. You don't kind of end up navel gazing or speculating. I was also deeply aware of, it always struck me that the element of luck and circumstance in how well we make it is so large that it's almost kind of fruitless to spend a lot of time worrying about whether you're, because first of all, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And you can't plan in the way that you imagine you can plan. Like the lesson of middle age is the lesson of like what a crapshoot life is. It's like and you could take it a million different paths, and things could have turned out dramatically different if this or that had happened, and you begin to understand on a kind of fundamental level how fortunate, if you are someone who's succeeded, how fortunate you are. It's really like it's good luck is like at the core of so much of what we do. So I've always had that. My mom always communicated to me that how lucky we were and how lucky I was. She was right. She was just like, because her story, you know, she's a Jamaican girl from the middle of nowhere, right? Like tiny little house and no electricity or running water in the middle of the hills of central Jamaica. Like growing up in the Second World War when the whole world seemed to be ending. I was just on the phone with her yesterday and she was talking about like, you know, when you're my age, you've seen so many of these things. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
But like that perspective that was a very useful perspective to have as a kid because it just means you relax. You're like, you can't control everything, and chances are you'll get lucky in some unanticipated way. And you can also, the other thing that, this is a more kind of abstract notion, but my dad was a mathematician, and one of the things I would sometimes, you know, if I was struggling with some bit of math homework as a kid, I would take it to my dad. And he would give, because he knew so much, he would give very unconventional advice to how to do my math homework. And one of the things that he would always point out is I would be struggling to answer a problem a certain way. And he would be like, well, you know, there's 5 ways to answer that problem. And he would like show me the 5 different ways to solve the problem. And that idea that like, there's not one path. There's multiple paths. Yeah. And if one is blocked to you, you just take one of the other paths, right? Like, and once you understand, particularly for people like us who are in this position of incredible privilege in the 21st century in North America, like we have multiple opportunities. Like if I told you couldn't go to medical school, are you trying to tell me you would be selling shoes in a strip mall? No, you'd be running something else. You just would have done something else, like yes. Because you would have a million opportunities, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's like, that's an incredibly freeing. I've always thought I could be doing something else.
That's amazing. I think that's such a, you know, my dad is, you know, the Jamaicans. Now we can go into the Jamaica part, but my dad always says, you know, whatever I'm going through and I might be a little down, you know, he says it may be long, but not forever, you know. Yeah. And the other thing that I think is fascinating that they always say is like normal days are amazing days or normal days, right? Like, which is flipping it to what you're saying is that, you know, my mindset should be that every day I'm doing something. It's the best thing ever, you know. But speaking of Jamaica, so we have that connection, right? The Jamaican Canadian, you know, immigrated to America, which I keep telling people I'm an immigrant, and they say, "Well, you're from Canada." And I'm like, "Well, okay, you know, I'm still an immigrant." But I am fascinated, and I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm fascinated by Jamaica's impact, and you know, I write about, you know, you write about it at the end of Outliers. I probably write about it too much. It's all over my book, but I'm just looking at this island with, you know, 2.5 million, maybe 3 million people that have had such a profound impact on the world through music, through you name it. What do you think that's from? Like what is the heart and soul of Jamaica that it makes it so powerful?
I don't know. It's like it's this kind of exclusive club thing. You know, like, and there's somebody once made this argument, pointed out this thing to me that the world is full of these small groups that outperform the Armenians. There are subpopulations of India in South India that are insanely successful. Jews, you know, we can go down the list of Jamaicans are on that list, right? And a lot of it, you know, this idea. When I say I may make the comment about an exclusive club is half a joke, but it's half not a joke. But that idea that you belong to a special culture, and is a really, really, really powerful one because it empowers you, and you see examples all around you, or you have a kind of cultural script that allows you to succeed. You had Donovan Bailey on your podcast. If you're a kid in Jamaica and you're fast, it is completely plausible for you to dream of being a world-class sprinter.
Yes.
Why? Because you're surrounded by world-class sprinters. You've seen that movie play over and over again. It's not like, that same kid in, I don't know, Taiwan or South India has no expectation of that. Like there's no script where somebody becomes a world-class sprinter. Or I'm just using that example as a similar. If you look at, the massive overrepresentation of African Americans in sport of basketball, same thing. If you go and play in one of those playgrounds in Harlem or South Side of Chicago, whatever, they know someone who made it in the NBA. It's not to say that they're going to make it, but it's not implausible. It's a kind of thing that that has happened, and I think these kinds of what these highly successful cultures do is they've found a way to spread that message of possibility to everybody, and that's that turns out to be hugely, a Jamaican immigrant coming to America has so much evidence that you can make it in this country, right? It's just
it's funny, when you describe it, the goosebumps at the end of Outliers for me, because, you describe, because I didn't, and I think that's maybe why you did it. I mean, I didn't fundamentally know that about you. And so, and then, I told you before that I was forced to write my last chapter in my book. And what I noticed is that there's an emotional essence for me, and I don't know if you have this too. There's this emotional essence, almost to the point of where it's for me, because I'm an emotional dude, but you almost want to tear up when I think about, what Jamaica means to the way I act, the way I behave, the height I am, the body build I have, and just really just the work ethic. And also how that generation, my parents were amazing. Both Jamaican immigrants, both immigrated separately to Canada where they met. But they also had, some things that were uniquely Jamaican that were good and bad, that were the fundamental qualities that ended up raising me. So I'm always fascinated. I like your description, but I do think that Jamaicans, there's also a pride. I also noticed that too, and maybe it comes from that same thing too. That Jamaicans, even when they're not the fastest, even when they're the slowest, they believe that they're the fastest.
Yeah. What's the name? God, now I'm spacing on his name. The Jamaican singer, the huge Jamaican reggae artist of the moment. Oh man.
Vibes? You're talking Vibes Cartel?
Yeah, Vibes Cartel.
Yeah.
Who first of all, he's so kind of quintessentially Jamaican in so many ways, but his productivity, was he written 900 songs or some kind of crazy thing, still going strong in his. That's there's a certain energy that there's a very Jamaican energy about that kind of creative productivity. That this is. There's some kind of if I had to put my finger on what makes Jamaica special, each of these cultures we've talking about has a different thing that sort of sets them apart. But in Jamaica, it seems to be this kind of combination of energy and joy.
Yeah,
that makes an incredibly powerful combination for people who are trying to kind of trying to succeed.
Energy and joy. I mean, I would add there's sort of this weird part of Jamaica, which is competition, and you can see it when you land or you go to the market. There's this competition. Come to my shop. That I think that's why I think track is so amazing, because I think you grow up competing to get into school, and then to run at that school. So I think that there's a competition component too. But it's I don't have a choice, but I'm very glad to be of Jamaican descent.
Yeah, it's great. It's like
Yeah.
it's just like a kind of awesome world to be a part of.
Okay, I want to put you on the spot though.
Hmm.
And you're such a humble individual. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question. Do you have a superpower? Do you have something that
I mean,
I know you're going to scoff at a little bit, but I mean, is there something that like, hey, I do, this is something that's unique to me. I do really well. I don't lose any energy when I do it.
this is going to sound very nerdy, but I can, suppose I was writing an article about you and I interviewed you for an hour and a half. At the end of that hour and a half, I go, I make a transcript of the conversation. I can look at that, so it would be 20 pages transcript.
Yeah.
I can look at that transcript and know instantly how to transform it into, a half an hour of great audio or 3,000 word article. I can just see it. And it's just from I've been doing it for so long now. It took me a long time to get there, but I can see in my head a story buried in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I was close.
What's that?
I was close. I thought that I was going to guess, if I would guess, that storytelling is your superpower.
Yeah, remember, storytelling, you need raw material.
Right.
So
right, true.
I'm not like a fiction writer coming up with a story out of whole cloth. I'm transforming things. And so I'm very dependent on acquiring material to tell my stories. That's why I spend, when people think about what it means to be a writer or a nonfiction writer, most of my time is spent talking to people. It's not writing.
Yeah.
Writing is the thing you do at the end of and if you do your talking properly, the writing takes up a relatively short amount of time. My job is finding, lining up, and talking to interesting people. That is at its core what I do for a living.
That's awesome. And the other thing that I think you do in those conversations, I'm sure, and you did it with me, but you, and maybe, I don't know if you try to do this, or you generate very quick connection in a very intriguing way. Like, you'll go to, I don't know, I'm not a social person. I'm an introvert. I do not like social events. But you can imagine going to a social event and being stuck having to talk to people. People like that can connect with people on sort of an extroversion scale, but you have an ability to connect deeper. Maybe you just did that with me. maybe.
No. Well, that's a very simple explanation for that, and that is that I just like, I really enjoy meeting strangers.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that I'm an extrovert, but we were just in Florida, and we rented this house in this little beach community, and some guy and his wife came up to me, and they had read my books, and I ended up chatting with them for half an hour, because 3 questions in, I realized, this guy's super interesting.
Yeah.
I still don't know what he did for a living, but he was from Birmingham. He was a white guy from Birmingham, Alabama, who was very self-aware about Birmingham. And it just was interesting, just to hear and then I started asking him about Florida and once you get past that 3rd question, then you're off to the races. When people just have to sense that you have more than a surface interest in who they are, what they're doing. And once people pick that up, then I think it's quite easy after that. But it is really hard, I think, when I say the third question, I think I mean actually that specifically, how are you and where are you from are the kind of, you go to the next level.
Right.
Something that demonstrates that your answer matters to me and is an invitation. I'm giving you an invitation to more conversation. That's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And when people hear that invitation, then they're like, it's like the world opens. It's funny because not to bring this back to medical care all the time, but I feel like at the core of what a lot of doctors do is the patient interview, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key to the whole thing. You got to unlock them. They're not going to tell you what you need to know with a series of rote questions. I've not only have observed myself doing this in a doctor, and I realize I leave the appointment and I realize I didn't actually tell them
Right.
what I should have told them. And it's like, is that my fault? Is that their fault? Like, what was I doing in there? Like, why was I shy about, what X or Y? But then even more when you realize when there's a cultural distance between the patient and the provider, how much harder it gets. And like people's, how we misread cues in unfamiliar
Yeah.
cultures, and it's like it's a topic of kind of endless interest for me.
I think you hit something on the head though. In respect to healthcare, I thought about this after our last conversation, and I think, you try to evaluate. Am I? I'm leading this. I'm a leader now. I'm a CEO now. But at some point, I made the decision to go into healthcare because I just want to help people. I just want to make them feel better. And I think the best physicians do what you talked about as your superpower. You don't really go in with the logical. Here are the 27 things that I need to make sure that I find out from them, so I can narrow down the 8 things they may or may not have. It's just connecting. It's just sitting with them and asking them about what worries them, and inevitably you find your way to what's going the problem.
Yeah, this actually brings up something I've thought about with respect to your world and AI. I think we touched on this a little bit when we had our last conversation, but if we think that by introducing AI into the doctor-patient relationship or into aspects of it, what we're doing in the best version of that is we are transferring some of the responsibilities currently carried by the doctor to a machine, to software, what have you. And the question is, what do you do with that time that you freed up? If we made a kind of formal commitment to say, I'm just talking now about the standard patient doctor visit, right? That kind of entry with your primary provider. Probably, if we made a commitment to, let's see if we can get 10 more minutes of conversation between a doctor and a patient on average across all of those primary care encounters. I'd love someone to figure out how much benefit would that bring to healthcare in this country if I gave you all 10 minutes? And can I use an extra 10 minutes? And can I use AI to help us get to that extra 10 minutes? And my suspicion is that extra 10 minutes would be of incalculable value. Maybe not all measurable value, but just in kind of, if we think of so many of the problems with the provision of healthcare as essentially cultural, in the sense that people who need to go to the doctor don't go to the doctor. People who sometimes go don't get out of that visit what they need to get, or the doctor fails in some way at understanding what the problem is. So many of those problems are solved by time.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea of like reframing, instead of having all this gloom and doom about AI, just saying, this is the function of this technology.
Yes.
It's going to get me 10 more minutes.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, we talked about that last time. I think AI in healthcare, maybe not in other areas, but in AI in healthcare will, if used appropriately, will make physicians more human. It'll actually make them more human, because I think if you look at it, I think my generation, the ex doctors, kind of grew up using technology. Like we don't, the baby boomers were the ones, like when the EMR came, the electronic medical record came, they're like, I'm quitting. But, I mean, I can remember being in medical school, going to the VA and putting the entire chart, typing the entire chart. And so new technology in some ways is more adoptable, and generations after me definitely love the new. But to your point, if you don't make it more human, you have an opportunity to be more human, or you have an opportunity to see more patients. And depending on the motivations behind why you're doing it, you may actually be more productive and therefore make more money, or maybe, can pay back your student loans, which is important. But you could have that opportunity to be more. I'll tell you a little story that is 100% along those lines. When I just got out of residency, I really just use knowledge. I like, oh my gosh, this person can't breathe. I intubate him. And I met an older doc who was like, hey, just go talk to him. I'm like, but they can't breathe. He's like, go talk to him. And he was able to avoid intubation and really treat. So I think it's to that point. He was being more human. I was being very algorithmic.
Yeah. It's been really interesting for me to observe my mom, who is now 94 and doing very well, to listen to her talk about her relationship to the healthcare system in Canada, and how she's incredibly happy. And I ask her, like, what is it about your healthcare that makes you so happy? And it's just that she has been blessed with a series of doctors who will listen to her. It's not about objectively the quality of care, because she's 94. Like, what does it matter? Like, we're not interested in heroic medicine here.
Right.
She has some aches and pains, and she wants someone to go and, like, give her a sympathetic ear and some understanding of what her values are, which is she doesn't want to, like, take 20 pills a day. And she's fine with, like, she doesn't need heroic measures. She just wants to be taken seriously as a human being. It's all she's ever wanted. Right. Like, she just, nothing, she probably would have said the same thing at 15. Just take me seriously. I don't need you to, like, I don't need heroics. I just need the world to look at me as a Black woman and understand that I am the equal of anyone. That's what she wants. Yeah. Right? And the system has given her that. For all of its flaws that people like to rail on about the Canadian healthcare system, they have given my mom her humanity. And that's the most important thing of all. Yes.
So you talk about, so when we talked last time, you said healthcare and crime are the things that just fascinate you.
Yeah.
And can we talk about the new book, or is it? I mean, I know.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about it. But I want to make one last healthcare point.
Yeah.
We're doing this. We're hopeful of doing this project, which I won't get into the specifics of it. But I have been, for the longest time, fascinated by the fact that people hate the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, I was looking at these. They do these rankings every year where they ask a cross-section of Americans, what industries do you trust the most? Pharma ranks below the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Insane. Like, an industry, it is essentially devoted to helping us all live longer, happier lives. And, there is no more complicated, hard task than that. And it happens to take a lot of money and give you a million political minefields. But the idea that you would somehow think that Exxon was more important, was more worthy of your trust than, like, so, like, that's one of the little things we've been really interested in is, I think at base, it's a storytelling problem. And it's not confined to pharma, but it's confined to many aspects of the overall healthcare world, is that you guys do a terrible job of telling your own story. Yeah. A terrible job.
Yeah, no,
like, I remember...
Go ahead.
I can see on my riff, when that terrible tragedy happened to the United healthcare CEO, and, like, this weird thing happened where people were, like, cheering his killer online. And I was like, do you have any understanding of how hard it is to be a health insurance company? Like, you have to say no. If you didn't say no, nobody would have any health insurance. The whole point of insurance is supposed to distinguish between those who, just like, I was like, what is wrong with this industry that they cannot explain fundamentally what they're doing to the American public?
But right? That's a very uniquely Canadian view of the healthcare, that someone has to say no, because we grew up with that, with that model. Yeah. What's interesting, I think, because now you got me thinking about healthcare. COVID was my first realization that healthcare is part of healthcare's problem, right? And I think the COVID vaccine was a great storytelling and you write about that, in Revenge at the Tipping Point. But here, it's like, hey, here's this vaccine, take it. It will save your life. And if you're Black, take it first. Sort of like, it was just this crazy, where like you guys, they needed to call you and say, Malcolm, what's the best way to tell this story?
I know.
But I want to stay on healthcare a little bit now, then we'll go to the new book. But when you, really quick, if you, sort of short answer, if you could magically fix the healthcare system, what's the one thing you would change? Like if you could snap your fingers.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, in the United States, and not sure this is true for every culture in the world, but I think there has to be way more market discipline in medicine. A price has got to, we've got to have real prices. We've got to know, you should be able to shop and compare for the provision of basic services. It's not a bad idea to have a really high deductible insurance, and then the government provides people who need it with some kind of, there's got to be some, people have to make their own choices, ways to make their own choices about what they want from the system. That's the only way. Right now, I just feel like the system is so chaotic. And also, employer-provided healthcare is just a bad idea.
Yeah.
It just is. It's not, like, what are we thinking here? Like, you shouldn't have to lay awake at night. What happens to your family if you lose your job? Like, it's just like, that just seems to me. So that would be, I would try and address, there's no way, at the same time, I would say, we'd be honest with ourselves, there's no perfect system. Every system is going to drive some people crazy. We have to abandon this notion that there is this magic thing out there. No, it's like they all have their pluses and their minuses, and you're picking your poison, basically. But so that would be, I'd like a little, the pricing thing is nothing. You can't do anything in life unless you know what something costs.
Yes.
Like, can you please tell me what this costs?
Yeah.
Like,
it's a bizarre structure.
The woman who takes care of our kids has got this in the middle, this long, complicated thing where it's bottom line is she's been told that she owes some hospital $50,000, and she doesn't owe them $50,000. Like, that's not a real number, right? So, like, I don't even know how to help her. Like, how do I explain to someone who's not sort of sophisticated about American healthcare system that this number that's terrifying you is not real? Anyway, that's a side thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So I'm so curious. American Way of Killing. I want to spend a few minutes on that.
It is this book. I'm almost done. Comes out in the fall. I'm trying to explain what is peculiar and distinctive about America and gun violence. Why do we have this gun violence? And what's really interesting is, like, America does not have a higher crime rate than other Western countries. Our crime rate is, you're more likely to be mugged and have your house burgled in London or Paris than you are in New York. Like, crime's not the issue. Violence is the issue in America. That's what's distinctive. And first, so we have to, like, separate crime and violence. They're separate things. The kind of person who robs you is not the kind of person who shoots you.
Right.
The person who shoots you is probably someone you know, who, when you and that person are high or drunk. The person who robs you is a separate category. And then I sort of try to walk through and describe how did we come to the point where we have such a fundamentally broken and dishonest conversation about gun violence. So starting with the Supreme Court, all the way down to, the chapter I've just been revising them this morning, actually, it's this really fun one where, did I tell you about this? The trauma surgeon from Howard University.
No.
The head of trauma surgery at Howard. It's a guy named Eddie Cornwell.
Yes, I know the name.
Yeah, famous trauma. Has treated, he told me, over the course of his life, 3,450 gunshot victims. First, which, by the way, and I make this point in the book, there is no one, I'm going to guess, in the world who has treated 3,450. Think about it. There's no other country in the world where you would possibly get that kind of patient volume. He trained in LA County in the 80s, went to Baltimore, East Baltimore, Hopkins, and then DC. So my first point is so he's like one of the America's most renowned gunshot surgeons, experts. That as a subspecialty does not exist anywhere in the United States. By virtue of how insane our gun violence problem is, we've created a category of expert that has never existed anywhere in the world until this point, right? He's like but the point of one of the points I make is that we can't have a real conversation about gun violence in this problem in this country because people like Eddie Cornwell hide the problem from us. They've gotten so good at saving the lives of people who've gotten shot that we see the murder rate going down and we think, oh, we're being less violent. No. Eddie's saving those people when they come to the ER, and so it's aggravated assault and not a homicide. They forget that the homicide rate is violence minus the quality of health care.
Yes.
And you guys have done such an unsung, insanely brilliant job of saving the lives of young men who are got 5 bullet holes in them, that the rest of us can sit back and say, oh, we don't have a problem. The homicide rate went down.
Yeah.
No. Aren't you an ER doc? I've forgotten.
Yes, I'm ER doc,
yes, it's you.
Yeah.
Moo, it's you.
Yeah.
You.
It's my fault.
But you know what I'm talking about.
100%. 100%.
If you walked into in the last 40 years, the difference between what happens to you if you walk into if you're carried into an ER with 3 gunshot wounds, it's like night and day.
It's night and day. Yeah.
Night and day.
Yeah, and I think the response time too. The response time. But it's such a, I mean, as usual, and of course I'm biased because I'm a fan of the stories you tell, and I think it's a brilliant idea. So I have just a couple more questions
Sure.
So that's an amazing idea. Have there been ideas that you've had for a story, a podcast, a book that you're just like, that was not a very good idea?
Well, yes, but that doesn't mean you abandon them. That means you keep going. To me, it's all about that's not a good idea yet. So I honestly believe there's a good story everywhere, but you just have to be patient enough to find it and to see it's often buried. You just have to kind of take your time to. And if you take your time with people, everyone is interesting. It's just that some people, it's harder to find what's interesting than others. Sometimes if you're talking to a guy who just climbed Mount Everest, it's just not that hard to get an interesting story out of him. It's in part of his resume. He climbed on it, that's where you start. But if it's more if someone thinks they're not interesting, you got to work a little harder to find exactly why they're wrong about themselves.
Yeah. There's an idea that I had the other day. That's not the other day. It's actually about 2 years ago, and I wanted to explore it, and I think I still am after being prompted by that conversation. But I think Uber and Lyft drivers are fascinating. I think they're amazing, fascinating stories. Because most of them aren't doing Uber and Lyft as a career, right? They're doing it for another reason. Sometimes I ask their stories and talk to them, and every once in a while I'm like, hey, can I record this? Because I feel like there's some fascinating. There are people who have been surgeons in other countries and can't get their license in America, and they're driving Uber.
That's heartbreaking.
It's just fascinating.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, it's a cross section. Any kind of cross-section moments are super interesting. Yeah. I was just reading about cystic fibrosis. And what's really interesting about a genetic disease, it never occurred to me until I was reading about it, was a genetic disease is a cross-section. So in the patient population, or in this case, the parents of the patient's population, you get everybody. You get like billionaires. You get people who are like cleaning houses. So like when people with cystic fibrosis, or the parents of those with cystic fibrosis, get together, it is society.
Yeah.
It's not like, other diseases are very specific in who they,
socioeconomic status or
yes, exactly. Like this is not that. This is like really, and that's really, really interesting. And that changes the way the disease is addressed, right? Like when you look at the fight against cystic fibrosis, there's a guy who was number 10 at Microsoft who had a kid with cystic fibrosis. Yeah. They sign him up and he goes to Bill Gates and gets like a huge chunk of money for the first trial of one of the, that's what happens when you have a true cross-sectional disease, right? A socially cross-sectional disease. It made me wonder, like so many of the problems we have difficulty addressing in society are difficult because they're not socially cross-sectional. They're confined. Gun violence would be the classic example.
Yeah. And then you make judgments based on those cohorts rather than on the disease itself.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound. So, if you you were, I was blessed for you to read Less Than 1%, and it's funny because I have all my presentations are basically I have 100 slides of all these different stories that I like to tell, and based on who I talk to, I bring out certain aspects of those. Like I just talked to SNMA, which is a bunch of young Black physicians, and the DJ in me and the rapper in me came out, and it was great. Like we were dancing and rapping. But is there a story that you look at in Less Than 1% that you felt sort of sounded like me, the mood that you've known, that you've learned about?
Sounded like you. Oh, that's different than I.
Or is there one you like? Is there a story you like?
Who is the figure skater?
Saria Bonley.
That story,
yeah,
I thought was mostly because I find that sport to be incredibly interesting and not well understood by people outside of it, and the kind of that was my favorite. That was my favorite in the book. I wish there's still this thing where, like, quote unquote, female sports get far less. We just don't know about them or take them seriously in the same way. And I just love that. I thought that was a great chat. I was so pleasantly surprised. I don't know. I was just like, oh, this is all new.
That's awesome.
It had that feeling for me. But
it really with Ilya Malinin, if I'm saying his name correctly, she cropped up again. So a lot of people are super interested in that story.
How did you get on that story?
Say again?
How did you get on that story?
How did I get on that story? Long-winded way, or the short answer to me being on that story is my sister. So my sister was a figure skater. And so we grew up, I mean, she's 5 years younger than me, but I grew up watching Serena Bonley. That's who because again, you go back to what we talked about before. It's like, whoa, there's this short, athletic, we're all short, athletic, Black young girl who, and then I think even more so is when she started losing, which I think is also fascinating, right? The idea that she just, she'd do amazing things and then just come ever so close. And then you feel all that, all that rage and all that negative energy from being misunderstood and underrated and, underrepresented. So I blame my sister for my most amazing story. So if you had viewers out there, a lot of people that are watching this are saying Less Than 1%, they've heard my story, the reluctant sort of person that then got the opportunity to do amazing things. What would you tell them? If they're out there and they're struggling through trying to have an impact greater than they think that they're being acknowledged for, what would you say to them?
I would go back to what I said earlier in the conversation about that lesson from my dad that there's more than one way to solve a problem. And I think that the danger we have when we're trying to succeed in the world is to think that to identify a pathway, and if we fail at that pathway, to think that we failed, as opposed to, oh no, it's just because there's 5 pathways and you just have to try another one. That idea that like there's more than one way to get at the right answer is really, really, really important and powerful one. And that when you look at any field of high achievers, what's really striking is how much variation there is in their stories.
Yeah.
Just like I was reading this book I was talking about cystic fibrosis. If you look at the people who tackled cystic fibrosis so successfully, and I was just looking, I was like, this book, I was reading this book and it talked about all the key researchers. Nobody went to there was no Harvard and Yale.
Yeah.
It was like all these, it's like half of them were like, it was like the farm kid from Nebraska who goes to the University of Nebraska and then gets a fellowship somewhere and meets someone along the way who turns him into this really blah, blah, blah. And you just realize, we get in our heads sometimes like, oh, you got to go here, here, here. Otherwise, this is one of the most extraordinary medical stories of the last 100 years, the way we successfully treat CF. And the people who did it it's just a bunch of people from what seemed like really ordinary backgrounds.
Yes.
And they found the path they found was, it's not who you are, it is the topic you choose to tackle. What they all had in common was they could see something interesting and important and meaningful in tackling a forgotten, impossible, tiny disease, right? That's what they had in common: a commitment to a quixotic task, and and the ability to see, it's not quixotic. It's like, actually, we can get somewhere with this. We just need to like focus for 15 years. That's incredibly. That's their little pathway. Who knew that was a viable pathway to working on one of the most exciting medical achievements of the last 50 years. It turns out it is, right? Like that's what I would tell them.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate, your time, your friendship. I appreciate the time you spent with me, because you spent a lot of time with me. So I'm excited about that. But no, thank you so much. And
not at all.
Everybody.
One thing I wanted to,
what's that?
I wanted to say before we go. When I saw you last, you were talking about this kid who was a rookie in the NBA who went to some school near you, who's now like.
Yeah.
Wait, what's his name? I've forgotten his name.
Cedric Coward.
Cedric Coward. He's a great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's sort of, we talked about that earlier. I coached him for 10 years, 12 years. Like
really?
It's fascinating to.
He could be an all-star down the road.
Yeah. Oh, he's definitely going to be an all-star. Yeah. I think he's going to make the all-rookie team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. I was like, I didn't, you said the name and I somehow got it mangled in my head. And then I was like reading about like rookies in the NBA and I was like, wait a second. That's the guy Moog was talking about. He's serious, this kid.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, I'm a point guard in my life, and I feel like, I don't think I'm ever going to achieve greatness, which is fine, actually. I'm introverted, so it's fine. But I always feel like I can pass the rock to a lot of other people. And I love when I see stories like that. I could sit here and tell you about 10 other kids who maybe didn't make the NBA, but I know that the time that we spent with them, flying them around flying them around the country, having them play against kids they would never get an opportunity to, in situations they could have never. To your point, all of these, I mean, they were all Davids. There's not one of them that was a Goliath at the time. So that's my If I keep going, I'll start crying. So,
All right. Before we get to that embarrassing thing, this has been so much fun.
yeah, thank you so much, Malcolm. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
I tell everybody, go buy Malcolm. He doesn't need anybody else to buy his books because he sells so many. But seriously, if you want to be inspired, if you want to be entertained by stories that are meaningful and thoughtful and can change the way you view life, check out any one of his books. I have my favorite. I tried to get him on stage to tell me his favorite. He refused to, but so awesome. Thank you so much, Malcolm.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right.
Did not burn. They didn't know you were forged in the fire. They thought you'd give up, but you proved them wrong. You proved them wrong. And all along, you were the less than 1%.